Happy Monday and welcome back to the IDP Heat Seekers. Hopefully everything is well in the world where you are. We do appreciate you guys jumping on and joining us tonight. We took last week off, so hopefully you weren't looking for us. If you were, we do apologize, but it was 4th of July week and we wanted to give everyone a little break in between because we're about to hit high gear. We are less than 9 Sundays away from football, so that means training camp is right around the corner, and actually training camp for some teams starts in like 6-7 days, if I remember correctly. So we're to football season. So this week is this last week was important to let all the guys kind of be off. Some of the guys were on vacation, like our boy Austin and Dez. Some of us are counting down our vacation, like me, and some of us are living in a world of teething dreams, like Kraig. How is everybody tonight, Mr. Reith? How are you doing? And are you surviving with teething?
Yeah, I'm not teething. Thankfully, I can't imagine what that would be like as an adult having to go through teething. I think it's good that kids don't have to remember what that feels like as far as remembering that age. Kids teething, not wanting to sleep, all sorts of crazy fun. But we're here, had some time off, and it's hard to believe, but I think this is the eighth to last show that we have before the season starts. So time flies.
Yeah, once we get back into the season, it'll be back to the waiver wire IDP pickups, and other than that, it gets pretty quiet from the IDP until we get to the off season. So we do appreciate this whole entire off season of you guys hanging out with us, but look for content during the season on YouTube and rotoheat.com because it'll look a little different once we get to the season. Austin, what's happening in your world? How was vacation? And welcome back, my friend.
Man, it was great. Humid in South Carolina this time of the year. I got to go to Myrtle Beach with my family and just kind of enjoy some time away, which was nice. But
good. Yeah, this time of year, basically anywhere down south is hot and humid, and that's not a bad thing. I mean, you kind of knew what you were getting into, right? You know, the time of year. But
oh yeah, of course. Yep.
All right. So tonight we are talking. We're still in our redraft series, so we're going to be talking interior linemen. So this is more your D tackles. If you have a need to find out about some of the other positions, look at the previous episodes. I believe we have one left. We have cornerback, one individual grouping left. We have cornerback next week, and then we'll do team defenses the week after that. So that'll cover everything. So if you're doing individual defensive positions or if you're doing team defenses, we got you covered here. With that being said, the first, probably 4 or 5 really are no surprise. I mean, there's kind of the elite guys locked in. So at number 1, Aaron Donald from the Rams. He came back. He's not retiring. And it looks like he should still be kind of number 1 overall. Kraig, how do you feel about Aaron Donald? What gives you hope that he's still kind of the top interior guy this year?
He's just been that way for a number of years. He's sort of in 8 years in the NFL, done everything that you can do from a defensive tackle, defensive lineman position. He's got that strong motor, work ethic, and he's just been pretty much a menace since he got into the league. And I don't see any reason I think it's only his 8th or 9th year, why that would change now. The Rams defense isn't changing. The offense isn't going to be that much different. They've moved some pieces around as far as, who's in what personnel, but Stafford says he's more comfortable. And if the offense is doing well, that's going to do better for that defense in terms of having opportunities, good tackles for a loss, pass rushes, quarterback hits, whatever it is, sacks. And he gets you those tackles too. If you're looking at our Roto Heat scoring, he was the number 1 interior lineman. Like Brad said, it's mainly your defensive tackles, nose tackles, although you have some 3-4 defensive ends stuck in there too, like another guy that we're going to be talking about here soon, Cameron Hayward. It was actually pretty close between Donald and Hayward, but Donald was still the clear number 1 guy in terms of both the total and then your average points per game. So he was a clear, easy number 1 for me.
Yeah, it's cool with this guy because you really can play him in any format, and you've been able to for a while. I mean, it's no surprise for folks. Austin, thoughts on Aaron Donald?
He's one of the best players in the NFL right now. So you guys can hear me, right?
We can. You got some you've
sure.
got some Godzilla
okay, just making
sure. Going on where your audio and video is
oh no.
Hey, I find it entertaining.
Weird. All right, well, how does that sound? Any better?
Oh, that's perfect.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I have to kill the audio echo or whatever, cancellation, whatever it is. Anyhow, so yeah, I mean, Aaron Donald, he's one of the best players in the NFL, not only at his position, but just across the board. I mean, he's dominant. You look at his year-over-year performances. The guy's producing sacks. He's getting the tackles, especially last year. He got the tackles. He's getting in the backfield tackles for losses. I mean, he's impacting everyone around him on the defense. He's purely the best player on the field at any moment. You could argue that maybe some quarterbacks make bigger impacts and things like that, but to see a interior defensive lineman have this kind of impact on the game, every game, year over year, I mean, it's incredible. He's just a monster. So, I think that there's almost, I could say there was a tier break between him and the field.
Yeah, everybody else.
I mean, so I don't know that anybody could argue that Aaron Donald shouldn't be the number one. I mean, he's just that dominant. So, clearly he's the easy number one.
Yeah, I tried to, as I was prepping for the show, I did try to find a stat that painted a picture of him being negative, and there's nothing. I mean, PFF, he grades out in the 90s for pass rush, run defense. I mean, everything, anywhere across the board. And it shows. I mean, everywhere you hear people talk about first one in, to watch tape, last one out kind of thing. I mean, I was watching Bussin' with the Boys when they had Chris Long on, and and he was there in St. Louis when they were still in St. Louis. For Aaron Donald's rookie year, and by day 3 of training camp, Aaron Donald was the first one in watching film and stuff. I mean, the dude's just an impeccable work ethic, and it shows on the field, and then it turns into fantasy production. I mean, he's been dominant, and he's a guy that you can trust week in and week out for the most part. So not much more to say. And even I would say this guy, that number 2, DeForest Buckner from the Colts, I think he's one of those that you can consider, as a fairly solid starter in just about any format, depending on how deep your leagues are and your rosters are and your starting positions are. But, he's another guy that has been producing well. I think last year he had 9 sacks. I don't think he got double digit, but even, from San Francisco to Indy, the transition, he still was a strong fantasy play. We'll start with you again, Craig. How you feeling about DeForest Buckner, and is there any concerns you have with him?
No, not really. I mean, the one really nice thing about him is that he's durable and he gets those high snap counts. When you're looking at defensive tackles, a lot of those players do get a heavy rotation just because of the nature of the position. And you're sort of looking at, are you going to get any sort of pass rush only? Are you going to get tackles mainly? Or are you going to get both? And he does get you both. He gets you double digit tackles for a loss. He gets you in that, 6 to double digits, sort of sack range, but he gets you 40 to 45 solo tackles too. So he gets pretty much everything that you want. He's a huge guy, just by the pure size of his nature and his athletic ability and being on that field, he's going to get you quality points. So
isn't he like 6'6", 6'7" or something like that?
Yeah, like 6'7", was like 300, I think, something like
he's
that.
Monster.
He's just an enormous man. And I think it's helpful too that the Colts are going to have, in my mind, a beefed up pass rush this year. So it isn't just only attention paid to him. You got your boy from Michigan, Brad, that they drafted, that hopefully going to be healthy all year.
Right.
Inside. And they got Dayo Odangbo, who they drafted last year, I think, in the 2nd round, and some combination of him and Yannick Ngakoue, who knows just really a pass rushing specialist. Mm-hmm. So it'll be a nice defensive line. It's clearly a team with Super Bowl aspirations, and his availability is great, which really helps me keep him up there. Is that he regularly plays 15, 16 games a year and that high snap share for a D tackle.
Yeah. So far, these two, we all had a consensus 1 and 2. Austin, anything you want to add to the DeForest Buckner love fest?
No, I think he nailed it. I would say, DeForest Buckner, one thing about him that you got to love is just how consistent he is. I mean, he's a guy that, he's always on the field, doesn't miss a whole lot of time, and his numbers are consistent, and that's, what you want. So he's a safe pick and an easy pick to move at the top of your boards for interior defensive linemen. So, and I think that's why we have him there, so
right.
It's about all I can add.
Yeah, I'm a fan. I mean, and I would agree, as long as their defensive ends are healthy. Grover Stewart has been a strong guy next to him. I mean, not overly fantasy relevant, but just a good football player. I mean, this defensive line with the linebackers, corners, I mean, this whole defense is really strong. And you hope the addition of Matt Ryan helps this team, continue to grow and develop. And I'll be interested to see what that does to the amount of time the defense is on the field. He's a much smarter quarterback with the ball than Carson Wentz. So the defense, I wonder if it'll cause any concerns or have any issues on how long the offense is on the field versus how long the defense is on the field. This is probably the strongest offense Matt Ryan's had in probably 3-4 years, offensive line and players on the outside and running back. So I'll be interested to see what that does to it. I don't really have too many concerns. I'm with you guys. He's kind of number 2, but I'm definitely with you in the sense that there's a tier break. If you're looking at interior lineman, Aaron Donald is up at the top. Now, the question I do want to pose and that I thought about just recently is, when you're drafting these guys, where would you consider in an interior, when you have to play D-tackle, where would you consider drafting these top couple of guys? What round? Is there a specific area where you would think you would probably start considering him? And I'll give you a second to think about it while I say thank you for everybody for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe and hit the notification icon if you want to stay up to date with everything we do on YouTube. That was our sponsor break. All right, Austin, I'll start with you. What round are you drafting interior lineman at? And this would be a redraft format, obviously, but where do you look at grabbing those guys?
Yeah, I mean, it just really kind of depends how the draft's going for me. Obviously, I'm going to want to grab my linebackers and probably a defensive end, at least one, before I ever even think about, and probably even a safety before I ever even think about going defensive line. Defensive line is usually kind of right there around cornerback where I start to, look at, okay, like who's available. Are we talking, with offensive guys too, or are we talking just a defensive?
Yeah, just in general. I was trying to throw a softball up, and where do you typically see interior linemen start getting drafted at? Is it 14, 15, 20? Not at all. I mean, things like that.
Yeah. In redraft, probably in that 16 to 18 range. Especially with offensive guys, you could potentially see them go like 16 to 18 is where they would start to go. And again, it's just going to depend on roster construction and what I have, built around it as far as, if I go defensive lineman or not right there, or if I just wait. We do have some pretty good guys on this list. So, if I'm not grabbing Aaron Donald and I'm looking at these other guys, then, there's some guys on this list that I'm intrigued by enough that I could say, yeah, I'm going to punt here and get better value. So 16 to 18 probably for me would be my guess.
Mr. Reith.
Yeah, so like we probably say every week, and you probably hear me say that we say it every week, know your league size and settings. If you're having 9 players on offense, which is, quarterback, 2 running backs, 3 wide receivers, a tight end, 2 flexes of some sort, that's probably semi-standard-ish now. So if you have defense, you got to figure out, how many of those do you have? If it's a situation where you have interior linemen, you're probably playing in a deeper, more advanced IDP league where you're having, an interior defensive lineman or 2 to 3 linebackers, 2 to 3 defensive backs, edge. You probably have another 9 or so there, so you have 18 starters. If you want one of these, and I wouldn't even say this whole list, but if you're sort of talking about the top 3 to 4 guys, is sort of where there just becomes a little bit of a mush, just in terms of average points per game, where they're kind of thrown together. You probably want to be taking one of these guys in the early teens, I'd say, because you're not going to get them past that point because the premium at that position is just so hard to find quality interior defensive linemen that are going to stand out. If we're looking at this in terms of like that roto heat scoring, if we go by average points per game, and that isn't as easy either because you have some guys that have 2-3 really great weeks, like Isaiah Mack for Baltimore last year averaged 7.5 points a game. He played like 2 or 3 games, if that. But there were like 15 guys that scored more than 6 points a game. That's not much at all. And, if you're going into 7 points a game, you're sitting there at like, on our list, Wilkins, Hayward, and Donald. That's 3 guys, and that's it as far as points per game. There gets to be just, like I said, that middle area mush where, like Austin said, it's probably easier just to punt it and find some guys that you like late that are, dart throws that you can recycle through if they don't pan out. But if you want one of these top guys that are going to give you that sort of edge at that position, you probably have to be taking them in the early teens is what I'd say.
Yeah, and just looking at our rotoheat.com rankings, there's only 3 of the defensive tackles from our list in the top 150. Donald, Simmons, Buckner. So, in theory, if you're kind of going down that type of list right there where you guys are at, in the 10 to 15, 16, 17 range, if you want to get any of those threes, or, you circle back around like you were saying and kind of rotating guys that you're interested in, or because there's always sleepers, guys that kind of pop off or grow and give you better production than what most people are anticipating. So there's always a few of those. So I just thought it'd be a fun question to give people an idea, especially with defensive tackle and cornerback, when to start drafting, because that tends to be the question that if anybody asks me each year in redraft, they'll ask me things like when to start taking D tackle, when to start taking cornerback in those leagues where you have to run them. So figured I'd throw that in there.
If you're on rotoheat.com at our rankings, remember those are dynasty. We don't currently have redraft rankings up, which is a significant difference.
Correct. It could be a very significant difference. Although I felt like with these top three guys, they probably need to, they're all probably top 150 players in redraft, depending on what your, like we always say, what your league's all about. All right. So number 3, Jeffrey Simmons, defensive tackle from the Tennessee Titans. Dude had 11 sacks last year, 44 tackles. And he's kind of a guy that folks were excited about. And then but he was hurt coming into the league and then, looked good when he came back. And then last year had a really strong season. So Kraig, what about him do you think will keep him productive with all the change that's gone on in Tennessee? I mean, you don't know with the uncertainty of quarterback and moving parts with AJ Brown and what makes you like Jeffrey Simmons?
So looking back at him when he came into the league, he was a guy that if he didn't get injured and didn't have some off the field issues, like one notable issue coming into the league, he probably would have been a top 5 to 10 pick. As it was, even with that, he went 19th overall, and that he only played 9 games that first year, and he didn't show a whole lot coming back from that injury you mentioned. Second year, he's still working through that, getting more playing time, and he did explode last year. And he gets you those tackles, not just those big plays, which shows to me that's the sort of guy that you want to be banking on if you're going to be taking someone this high, this early, that he can get you everything that you want. He just isn't a specialist like we see a lot of these guys end up being. Tennessee defense really isn't going to be changing in terms of what they're looking for. They still got the same head coach. They're variable with the same scheme. And Simmons really is that sort of guy in the defensive line that first line up to attack. And he's got great size. He's 6'4", 305, and he's got speed, agility, burst. He's got all of it, and he's shown that he's healthy and he can come back and just be that top defensive lineman for you guys if you're playing in those D-tackle or interior lineman leagues. And he's another guy, we talked about the first 2, him and probably even the next 1 or 2 have just defensive line, period, value, where you don't have to worry about, all right, well, he's a defensive tackle, I don't need to be looking at him. He's going to have value for you in all formats.
Austin, anything you want to add to that? Or
Yeah, so one thing that I thought was, you look at the grades for Jeffrey Simmons on PFF, and he was fine. He didn't generate a whole lot of sacks his first 2 years in the league. But last year we did see him kind of explode. One thing I thought was kind of interesting was going into the 2021 season. They do, and I like to catch this whenever it comes on just because I think it's fun to watch, and I like hearing some of the NFL players talk about it. But they do, the NFL Network has the NFL Top 100, and it's all voted on by the players. Jeffrey Simmons came in at number 78 overall. That's pretty impressive. So this is a guy that, when he steps on the field, the guys across from him, the guys playing alongside him, they know what he's capable of, and he is a force, and he is consistent. And I expect to see more of the same of that this year. And I think he's pretty locked into like the top 3. He should be. He's really good. He's really that good. And so he's consistent. If he can just keep his sack numbers up and keep those double-digit sacks, that's what you'd love to see. He's got to stay around the ball, keep getting those tackles for losses, things like that. But as far as being effective on the team and on the field, for NFL value, he definitely has that. For fantasy value, he's just got to keep that production up. And as long as he does, he should be, one of the top interior defensive linemen.
Yeah, agreed. Speaking of one of the top interior defensive linemen, this guy's been that way for over a decade now. Next guy up on our list, Cameron Hayward from the Pittsburgh Steelers. He actually would be probably if you just went by PFF grades, probably the number 2 guy behind Aaron Donald last year. I think he graded out in the upper 80s, around 90 in pass rush and run defense and all that. But there's really nothing to hate on with this guy. I think last year he hit double digits in the sacks. He gets you solos. I mean, all sorts of just really strong production. The team's getting better. They added guys like Miles Jack and obviously, hopefully some of these younger quarterbacks will help make the offense, give it a little bit of a spark. Kraig, what do you think about Hayward? Kind of give us a rundown and why you think this will be a good year for him still.
So interestingly, he had the highest solo and combined combined and solo sacks, combined and solo tackle stats of his career last year at his age 32 season, which is like he said, it's like 12 years, 11 years, something like that. And he still had the double-digit sacks and tackles for a loss. I think that's a couple things. One, like I said, he's just a great player. He knows what he's doing. He's perfected his craft. He's been on the same team, same basic scheme most of his career. Two, if you look at that division that they're in, it is really, and I think still going to be a run-heavy division, and I still don't think the Steelers are going to be a very high-scoring offense, which if they're scoring less, going to give those teams that love to run the ball probably, other than the Bengals, but you're playing Baltimore and Browns twice a year. That's 4 games for sure where teams just love to run the ball. They have a great set of runners, whether it's the quarterback and running backs or just the running backs. And talk about the Browns running backs, the big question mark at quarterback there as to how much explosiveness their offense is going to have. He's going to be a guy that is going to be able to continue to get you those tackles, and he is still the mainstay there. They've had some movement with Chris Wormley's coming back. They signed Larry Ogunjobi because Stephon Tuitt retired. I don't think it's going to matter. I think you're going to get the same sort of high level of production. If you're talking about averages, it's probably around that 54-ish combined tackles. Probably gets you in that 7 to double-digit sacks, and the same thing, probably double-digit tackles for a loss. He's just been a mainstay and a guy that you can count on year in, year out at this point until we don't see it.
Austin, what do you got? Other than being muted.
You're supposed to guess what he's saying, Brad.
Yeah, Brad. So I was just saying he's a consummate pro, unlike myself at this
what I would have guessed.
business.
That's what I would have guessed.
33 years old. He's a consummate professional. He's able to stay on the field pretty consistently, which is great. You love to see that. You love to see that, he's got TJ Watt on the defense. That's, going to attract a lot of attention on the outside. It's going to pull guys away from the middle. And Cameron Hayward's able to get to the quarterback and do things and, get to the ball. I mean, that's one thing he's really good at too, is he gets to the ball. And so, he's able to generate tackles for loss. His impact is tremendous on the defense, and he's just a fantastic player. He's a leader on the defense, just probably every bit as much as TJ Watt is. TJ Watt's the guy that's, everybody's wanting to talk about, on all these national platforms, and everyone recognizes because of how dominant he is off the edge. But Cameron Hayward's really the guy in the locker room that I feel like is probably that leader, that real veteran presence there, the guy that's probably even mentored TJ Watt along the way. And helped him, come along. So, yeah, he's just a tremendous player. He seems to be a great person. I mean, obviously, we don't know these guys personally, but he stays out of trouble. He does all the right things. He works hard. So, yeah, you just love to see it. And he's a great guy to draft. He's consistent. So, yeah, I'm with it. Cameron Hayward in the top 4 seems like an easy no-brainer pick.
Absolutely agree. So next up on our list, so this is the point where my pre-show prep was not on point. I did not get them in order. So after Cameron Hayward, I'm going with the next 3 guys that we all have ranked, and we're just going to kind of talk about them. And then the other guys, we're going to sprinkle some in. So the next guy up would be Quentin Williams from the New York Jets. This is a team that is currently in transition. Now, obviously, there's a lot of banter about all the stuff with Zach Wilson right now, but this defense is a defense that's on the rise. They're under the radar. They've made some moves, and they continue to add pieces. I'll start with you, Austin. Quinn will actually. You know what? I'm going to start with Kraig because Kraig has him ranked higher on his rankings than you do. So we'll go with him. And actually, I have him ranked highest, but I'm not going to talk. I'm going to let Kraig talk. So Kraig, talk about Quentin Williams. What do you like about him, and what do you think what he's going to do this year?
He ended up with sort of a similar year in his third year to his second year. He, sort of did mainly play a little bit of a different position with moving to that more true defensive tackle. They had been edge a little bit, or defensive end the prior year, but the results were about the same. He did play in a couple more games. But when Coach Robert Saleh took over that job at the Jets, one of the things that he pointed out that he really loved about the opportunity there was to be able to unleash Quentin Williams. And I still think he's going to focus on doing that. Saleh is a defensive head coach, and Quentin Williams is, again, just another one of these huge guys that is able to move insanely well. He's like 6'3", 303. He's a third overall pick. Interestingly enough, and it's kind of just a fun note, his brother, I believe it's his older brother, Quincy Williams, is on the Jets now too. He had restructured to remain there after coming over off of waivers from the Jaguars right before last season. So he's in a good position in terms of the talents around him this year, more so compared to last year. They did beef up that linebacker core a little bit in terms of just more guys that were really raw last year, having experience, and then some health and some additions to the defensive line. They have Jermaine Johnson that they drafted. Who's the guy that got hurt? Carl Lawson, I think. He'll be coming back from was it Achilles for him? I think it was.
I think so.
So, we'll see if that explosiveness is still there, but they gave Lawson a huge contract, and he was looking really good as to be a nice part of there. I think it's just going to be a more improved team overall, and that's going to help out Quentin Williams, so he isn't just sort of that single focus on the defensive line with not much around him. But even if he is, again, you're looking at 6 to 7 sacks, 8-9 tackles for a loss, probably 50-some tackles. It's a nice floor to be working with, knowing that, hey, if he does end up breaking out, the sky's the limit for this guy, and they're trying to get him there.
Yeah, I love their draft, when it comes to what they added on the defense to help. Quincy Williams had a solid year last year when he came over. CJ Mosley being there is strong. John, like some of these pieces that you talked about, but then they add, 2 defensive ends in 4 rounds, with Jermaine Johnson and Michael Clemens. I mean, they're trying to build up this line so that they can rotate these edge guys in and help allow JFM and Quentin Williams to kind of just, go rush the passer and do some of those things to get upfield. So I'm with you. I think he's got a strong potential this year to get close to double-digit sacks because this will be year 2 in Saleh's defense. I would love to, I don't want to compare him to the DeForest Buckner role in the San Francisco defense because that's, Saleh's scheme and how Buckner played. But I would love to see something like that where you're getting, 9 to 11 sacks with, like you said, some of the floor when it comes to those solos and combined. So, Austin, what do you think about Mr. Williams?
Yeah, I mean, you guys touched on the injury thing, and I think that's a really strong point for what we saw last year from Quentin Williams. And I would have loved to have seen him on the field with Carl Lawson, and then now he's got Jermaine Johnson rushing off the edge. C.J. Mosley was banged up last year, didn't really see the field much. So when you start to get those key pieces of the defense on the field, especially a guy like C.J. Mosley, who is a veteran, a guy who does a lot of things well. Carl Lawson, who in the offseason we heard a lot of talk about how well he was playing and how impressed all of his teammates were with him. And he was actually a guy that I had on a lot of rosters as much as I could get him. So yeah, you add those pieces back in as long as Lawson's able to come back, be healthy. Obviously the Achilles is a big deal, but they can come back healthy and he can elevate his game to where he's getting those double-digit sacks. I mean, I think I could boost him higher in my rankings. You mentioned when we started talking about him that I did have him a little lower. And that was really kind of one of the reasons was just, it's sort of like, do I think he can? Yes. Has he? Not quite. He's not quite there for me. So, but I think he has the potential. Yeah. I mean, and we watched him in college. My goodness, this guy was a monster. So if I see no reason to think that he can't do that at an NFL level. Just his power and his physique is just out of this world. So would love to see him elevate his game this year and become what we think he can be. And if he does, then he's definitely going to deserve to be right here where we've got him, right in this conversation of top 5 interior defensive linemen.
Well, then I'm going to put it on you a little bit, and we're going to put a little fire underneath you. So you have Christian Wilkins, who'd be the next guy up above Quentin Williams. Christian Wilkins did not produce as well as Quentin Williams. I mean, they're similar, but he's in the same type of situation where he hasn't really proven it being at the higher level to be bumped up ranking. So First and foremost, what do you think about Christian Wilkins? I know you and Kraig have him at the same ranking in your guys's for the show, but why would you put him above Quentin Williams as well? And this is recorded, so what you say is under oath.
Yeah. You ever heard the term "my guy"? It's sort of one of those deals where Christian Wilkins, I love his game. If you just watch the way he plays, as much as he is physical, he's mental on the field. He gets inside people's heads. He's got Emmanuel Ogbah still to rush off the edge, who I think is really effective. He does have Jerome Baker in the middle of the field, and Landon Roberts. They added Jalen Phillips to rush off the edge. They've got the back end of the defense. It looks really good. You got Holland, Xavier Howard, Byron Jones. When you get those guys on the back end, you're going to start to be able to generate more pressure. Quarterbacks holding the ball a little bit longer, things like that. So that's why I have Christian Wilkins rated so high. I don't think Christian Wilkins has hit his ceiling. I don't think he's come anywhere close to it. Just the way that he plays, he's as physically gifted as he is. He's not the biggest guy on the field, but he's quick and he can do a lot of different things. So he's more diverse in his game. He's not purely just a power rusher. He's got different ways that he can get to the quarterback, different ways that he can make plays. If I'm not mistaken, I think he's able, to generate some of those big plays you look for too, force fumbles, things like that. So he flies around the field and does a lot of things well, and that's kind of why I had him ranked a little bit higher. So for me, it is just a matter of preference. For me, if I was in a redraft league and I'm looking at interior defensive linemen and I'm really being pressed on who do I want to take? Am I reaching on Christian Wilkins? Maybe, but I like my chances. I do. And I'm a big fan of Christian Wilkins. So maybe there's some bias in there. I'm not sure. Kraig, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I like that I've just seen more progression, I feel, sort of in the jump from the second year to the third year, especially in terms of tackles. He had this sort of base of 40, 50 overall, and he had 89 combined tackles last year, along with the sacks and the tackles for a loss. He also got some pass deflections. He's been doing that throughout his career. He's getting a nice number of those, so if he gets scoring for those. And I just feel like he's in a better situation in terms of, although I like the Jets and what they're doing, I think that Dolphins team is going to be better, and he's going to get more opportunities to get those sacks, tackles for a loss type of thing, in regards to just getting tackles. So it kind of depends on what you're looking for in your league scoring and how those things split out. I do have these guys right next to each other in terms of, tiers. So it's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. I like them both. But that high tackle ceiling that we've seen Christian Wilkins get, I really like that in the defensive tackle, because by and large, defensive tackles in general, maybe not the group we're talking about tonight, if you can find a guy that's going to consistently get you those tackles, to me, that's what you want. And then you're hoping to get a tackle for a loss or a sack thrown in there just as an added bonus. But if you can count, get one of these guys in the late teens, perhaps, depending on your league, as opposed to the early teens, like where Aaron Donald goes or something, you're getting a relatively safe tackle floor. And then whatever added bonus you get week to week, that's kind of the sweet spot for me in terms of what I look for.
Yeah.
Yeah, I Wilkins has bumped down my list a little for me, and it's more so just because of the change, new coaching staff. I tend to not look too much into the reports in the offseason, whether players like a coach, don't like coach, things like that. But just typically when a new coaching staff comes in, they're bringing new schemes, they're doing new things and trying to put their stamp on the team. Wilkins is a very strong player. I like the player. I like the physical potential, the athletic profile, all that stuff. Only reason I bumped him down, I think I have him the lowest at, I think he's 8. Yeah, 7. Or no, he's 8 for me on my top 10. But he's an interesting player. I think as long as they keep him in a very similar type position, he should continue to grow. Let him rush up the field, let him wreak some havoc in the backfield. I'd be fine with that. And he will probably outproduce some of these other guys. When we were doing these rankings originally, I was throwing guys on here and taking guys off just because of position situation. And I even have a rookie in my top 10 just because of how much I like the rookie. But I really, as I was getting ready for the show tonight, I kept looking at it. I'm like, I don't think that's a good idea, So I think Wilkins will move up. If I were to be pressed in a draft, I think he would probably be, probably a couple spots higher for me. But I like the player. I think he's definitely intriguing. Another guy that is a strong defensive tackle, Jonathan Allen from the Washington Commanders. We'll start with you, Austin. We'll go to you on him first. What do you like about him? What do you think about him? What kind of production are you expecting from him?
Jonathan Allen's really talented. The thing with Jonathan Allen that you got to, hope for is that, that defensive line's able to come back and be healthy this year. I mean, last year they were in bad shape, and I think it really affected him. He had a pretty good season last year, and he's definitely grown. His production's increased year over year. His tackle ceiling's not quite as high as some of these other guys, but he did produce double-digit sacks, which you love to see. So he's able to do a lot of really good things. He's a little more lean than most of the guys on this list. So he's able to kind of do some different things that I think really complement the guys around him very well. Montez Sweat is more of the big physical, rusher, and then of course you have Chase Young, who just does everything. Jonathan Allen, for an interior guy, he's consistent. He seems to be able to stay on the field well, which you'd like to see that. He's a guy that I'm fine with. You'd like to see him get some more pass breakups and things like that, get his hands up and do some things there. But overall, if he can get his tackle numbers up and maintain those double-digit sacks, I think he'll be fine. We talked earlier about getting into that like mush of players, and he's one that I like in that like sort of group of mush where we're going to talk about a few of those guys over the next few guys. He is one of those guys that I like, and based on the rankings that we did, he's consistently in our top 10. So for every single one of us, we had him in there. So I think he's pretty comfortably in the top 6, 7 or so, probably around 6 or 7. I think is where we have him. So yeah, he's fine. I like him. I don't have any problem with Jonathan Allen at all.
Mr. Kraig, anything you want to add to him?
I'm just sort of curious to see how they end up using him. So, he'd sort of been more of a defensive end at the start of his career, and he'd been doing well. The tackle numbers have remained the same, but when they originally moved him to defensive tackle 2 years ago, his sacks and tackles for a loss really dipped compared to when they had him at end. And then last year, it jumped back up, and he had a really great career year. But I'm sort of just curious to know, is that a result of how they used him due to all those other injuries? Because, like Austin said, that team was just decimated, the whole team on defense, really, but the defensive line, especially due to injuries. They have Deron Payne there, who is more sort of a traditional type of nose tackle, if you will, where Allen's more mobile and able to get around and do that sort of stuff. He used to play end, like I said. So I just want to know, like, if we have this whole team healthy again on the defensive line, is he still going to be that beneficiary due to there really just being only him for a large part of the season, or is he still going to eat with the rest of that defensive line? I do like the talent a lot. When they had everyone 2 years ago, it felt like they weren't using him to the best of what we would want here in fantasy football. And despite how good of a real-life NFL player you are, if you're not being used in a way to get us points in fantasy football, we don't care as much. So that's my only hesitation of having him a little bit lower. I think it's like 9 on my list.
Well, and I don't know that he's ever really truly. He's always been a much better pass rusher than run defender. If I'd have to go and confirm it, but I know at least the last 3 years when I was looking at kind of just how he graded out, he's always been a better pass rusher. So as long as they use him in a position where they can focus him to do those types of things, I feel mostly good that he can get, 7 to 9, 10 sacks and, probably 25 to 50 combined tackles. I'm not exactly sure which part of that's going to be solo and then which is assist, but that's kind of where I see him when I look at him. But it's tough because they haven't all been healthy for very long, with these kind of elite players with the Chase Youngs and all that. It's some of it's guesswork, but we still feel good enough that we all have them in our top 10. So Be that as it may, there's a little bit more question and pause for concern with him, but not enough to not trust him as one of your starters because he's if you need to start D-tackle, obviously, because he should still produce fairly decent. Okay, so we do have questions, so I want to make sure we get to those. So we're going to rapid fire these last 4, and I'll just drop my rookie off the list for now. These last 4, we're just going to kind of take the next, 8 to 10 minutes and just talk about things you like or dislike about players. We got Leonard Williams from the Giants, Fletcher Cox from Philadelphia, Javon Kinlaw, who is the Buckner replacement in San Francisco, and then Kenny Clark from the Packers. So I'll start with you, Kraig. Of those 4 guys, is there anyone you like more than the others, one that you feel maybe is a stronger play, and just kind of talk about your thoughts of those guys and if there's anything that stands out to you?
Leonard Williams would be the next highest for me. He's a guy that he had always gotten pressure throughout his career. He just really hadn't translated it into some of those statistics that we like to see in terms of tackles for a loss, or especially sacks, like most leagues give you those at least. But when he made that transition to the Giants from the Jets, one of the reasons he said that he re-signed there is he felt like they had a plan to optimize him, to get him to be able to convert that pressure. And it turned out that they have so far. So the first full year there, he had 11 and a half sacks, 14 tackles for a loss with 57 tackles. Last year, he only had 6.5 and 5, but that was still his third best out of his career. And again, another guy that we kind of just talked about, upping that in terms of tackles. He had 81 combined tackles. So the way that the Giants are utilizing him, he had all that promise going to the Jets, sort of like Quinn Williams early in his career. Leonard was the 6th overall pick. They just didn't end up utilizing him the right way, again, for fantasy purposes, which we're looking at. The Giants have figured out how to utilize him. I still think that they're going to continue in that new coaching staff, smart coaching staffs, which I think Brian Dable is going to be, from what we've seen in terms of him just as an offensive coordinator. He's smart to put good people and smart people around him. I think that defense is still going to continue to utilize him properly because, to me, he's the best defensive lineman that they have.
Austin, of those guys, who do you want to talk about and what do you like?
Yeah, I hate to talk about the same guy, but Leonard Williams was the guy last year that I targeted a lot and thought that would be, really productive last year. They continue to build that defense around, the defensive line. They're doing the right things. Aziz Ojulari, I thought, was a great addition, and now they bring in Kayvon Thibodeau. They got Dexter Lawrence on the inside, who, he's really effective as well. So, Leonard Williams he's going to get his numbers this year. Obviously, out of those 4, he's pretty clearly the leader of those 4. And then, beyond that, because Kraig pretty much covered everything. Fletcher Cox is a guy that I have on my list that, I really like. He's been consistent. He's been that constant, veteran presence on that defense. He's productive. He doesn't miss a whole lot of time. I think, he might have missed. Did he miss any time last year? Do you guys remember? I thought he missed a little bit last year. He's getting up there in age, 31 and a half years old, but he does a lot of things well. And I'm interested to see how it goes with them bringing in Jordan Davis. Do I think he'll be the odd man out? No. Do I think he's going to be in a rotation more so? Potentially. He could potentially be rotated out more, but I think that gives him an opportunity to stay fresh. He's a guy that he's just always on the field and he's always making plays and he's always creating pressure, whether he's getting the sacks or not. He is one of those guys that when you put the film on and you actually watch the games, he is clearly a difference maker. And I just love Fletcher Cox, to be honest. And, he's one of those guys, like I mentioned earlier, kind of like a my guy that, if I'm this deep and I haven't got a defensive lineman yet and I'm looking somewhere, he's probably a guy that I'm going to look at and go, hey, you know what? He's probably good for, anywhere from 6 to 10 sacks. You'd love to see him get double digits, but 6 to 9 is pretty good. And he's going to consistently get in the backfield, make tackles for losses. He'll get some tackles. He's not one of the highest on our list as far as generating tackles. But he's still productive. He's still constant. He's consistent. He's still a guy that's reliable. And I think that's important.
Well, then, go ahead, Kraig.
If you're saying something about Cox, go ahead.
No, I wasn't. I was just going to talk about something else.
I was just gonna say, you need to defend yourself, putting Javon Kinlaw, who's done nothing in the NFL, at number 10 on here, Brad.
Well, and I put a rookie on here too, right? So for me,
Who's your rookie?
Christian Barmore from New England.
Who's a rookie last year?
Oh yeah, no, he's not. He's a second-year guy this year. Duh. Yeah. Right.
So I'm just curious. You said rookie. I'm staring at the list thinking,
so I must have hit myself in the head with a weight at the gym tonight. So I put two guys on here that it's more, like I'm going to use Austin's my guy thing. So with New England, I expect Barmore to be on the field a bunch and hopefully be able to get you some solid tackles. I don't necessarily expect him to get a crazy amount of sacks. Kinlaw is much the same. I still expect him, who's done nothing. What did he get? 1 sack last year, a few tackles. I mean, it wasn't really anything.
Last year. He had 8 combined, and that was it.
Yeah,
so tackles for a loss, no sacks. He got hurt and he played like 4 games.
Right. So it's all projection. But when I was looking at the D tackles, and I probably should have Leonard Williams on this list. Fletcher Cox, he's one of those guys where I'm expecting, because of what they have, to fall off when it comes to value, because they, added Jordan Davis, who's just a freak athlete who they're going to want to rotate in, having Hargrave still there. I mean, so for me, I was looking at, okay, where's the opportunity? They brought Kinlaw in to be Deforest Buckner Jr., right? So at what point is he going to show up or not? So in my mind, I'm willing to, let's be honest, after the top 4 guys, it's guessing, and it's going with my guys, the gut feelings. We all had a thought about, Quentin Williams or Christian Wilkins or Jonathan Allen. So for me, it was Javon Kinlaw they were bringing in to be Deforest Buckner. Is this year where he finally gets that production? Because I expect them to be on the field more. If they really are starting Trey Lance from day one, that defense is going to be on the field more. If Kinlaw is healthy, should produce some solid value. So it's a reach. I'm not saying it isn't. It's a risky pick when you could go get somebody else, but he's a guy that I think has the talent and potential to do it. So that's why I put him at 10. And then Barmore is much the same, except he's actually produced. He's been on the field and been healthy. So both guys I think have potential and opportunity. This is something we were talking about in our inner circle chat over the weekend, maybe even last week. Opportunity is really big. And I think both those guys have opportunities. Have they done enough to really be top 10s? No, not at all. But have they done enough to show me that maybe Barmore has, Kinlaw hasn't? Kinlaw is one of those, man. It's kind of like the guy that I'll be talking about on tomorrow night's show with Gary and the team. It's the, man, I really like this guy, and I'm gonna plant my flag, and I'm gonna die on the hill, and I may look stupid for it. It won't be the last time I look stupid for a fantasy take, right? Look at our YouTube channel over the last 5 years or 4 years. I've made some stupid takes. It just is what it is. So that being said, I want to make sure we get some questions, because we got some good questions in the chat. I do appreciate Jaws and Anthony and the crew hanging out with us and chopping it up in the chat. And we're going to get these questions now. So let us know in the comments what your top 10s are. We would love to hear from y'all after the show's over. We do know that our IDP content gets tons of love here on YouTube, so we thank you guys for that. It's hugely appreciated. With that being said, this part of the show, the audio portion of the show is done. We are going to go, the audio only for the podcast is done. We appreciate you guys. Don't forget, check us out every Monday in season. Check out our waiver wire content and any other types of stuff that we put out. And now we're going to get some Q&A, so we'll see you later.
Only doing hand signals from here on out.
It's all. There's no words at this point. So your questions will be answered in the form of blinks and clicks. All right. So do wonder. Okay. So Jaws' first question. Do wonder if Quincy Williams will still be out there a lot with Mosley coming back.
Yes.
I would expect him to, right? Like he's probably linebacker 2 on the team, right?
Yeah.
You mean Mosley had 17 games, 168 tackles last year, and Quincy still had over 100 combined for the limited time because he didn't play. He was banged up and didn't play a ton, but he's still the second main guy there. So Quincy Williams, he doesn't have defensive back eligibility in sleeper anymore. So if you play there, wah, wah. But in terms of just a late round flyer linebacker, I still love Quincy.
So you don't expect the second year guys to start pushing, Hamza and Sherwood?
From what we saw last year, no. I mean, Quincy performed better than they did, and they're learning a new position. Still,
Both of them. Weren't they both safeties, right?
Yeah.
So, Austin, you agree?
Yeah, I think so. I definitely think so. I mean, he's a linebacker too. He's a good complement to what CJ Mosley does, I think. So I don't see any reason for him to be, off the field too much.
Okay. All right. Jaws' next question. Jerron Reed fall all the way off after leaving Seattle? Hardly heard much from him. So the question I have, and I'm looking at depth charts, he's next to Kenny Clark in Green Bay, but doesn't Green Bay mostly sit in a 3-4 front? I mean, obviously we do, they're in dimes and stuff. But They do 3-4 a lot, right? So, yeah. So
they took Wyatt in the first round.
Who I love.
Yeah, I forgot about that too. So, I mean, that's just too hard for me to trust that he's going to have any fantasy value other than, he'll be streaky maybe, if they rotate him and he has some good snaps or something. But
This is where we talked about this mush and then, of course, like there's guys, if you like Jerron Reed and he's like your guy, then go for it. But, you were talking earlier about, let's see, who was it we were talking about? Oh, Kinlaw. I mean, you could make a case for, a guy right next to him, Eric Armstead, who could potentially make top 10 on this list, defensive lineman. He's been, productive and done what he needs to do. So, I mean, yeah, when you start to get into this range of, the 8 to 10, it gets a little weird. I mean, it could go any way. Like, it's just a matter of who you like. And
Right.
It is important, like you mentioned earlier, opportunity and, looking at guys' situations and things like that. So I would consider that over, it's a lot of guesswork. So opportunity at that point has to become king. Who's going to be on the field the most? Who's going to get the most opportunity to do something?
Well, that's why Seattle's defense I would be targeting and thinking about, I mean, it's tough to love their interior guys, but that defense is going to be on the field a lot if they're starting Gino or Drew, right? What were you going to say, Craig?
Just about Reed. If you really like Reed and you want to take a flyer, you think he's going to end up starting and have that opportunity next to Kenny Clark, and they're going to bring Wyatt along slowly or something, you probably don't even have to draft him. You can pick him up off of waivers later on. I haven't seen a league, even the deep leagues that I'm in, where Reed's getting drafted, and those are start two interior defensive linemen. And we have 50-man rosters. He's still not being drafted just because he's viewed as so far down that depth chart of relevance that if you believe in him, I'm not saying not to. I really liked him a lot, and when he went to Kansas City, I was really hopeful, and he just didn't pan out there in terms of the playing time and the rotation. But he certainly has a talent where if he gets the opportunity that he could perform. But I just don't think the opportunity is going to be there, like Austin said.
All right. So, Jerron Reed, better luck next time. Hopefully, you're right. Maybe you're sneaky and you get him and he's your sleeper. Anthony said, Jalen Phillips set a Dolphins franchise record for most sacks by a rookie at 8.5, but posted a low tackle total. Could he outperform those numbers from last season and find himself in the DL1 tier?
Go for it. I like Jalen Phillips, and I'll let you go first, Craig. Take this one.
Yeah, it's interesting. So if you're in a league where he's considered a defensive lineman, that just throws that whole big mush of players that normally would be edges that we talk about quite a bit into there. And I've even seen sites that have him listed as a linebacker just because of the way that Miami runs that defense. I think he'd have a really hard time. As much as I like the talent, I'd have a hard time seeing him be a top 10 or 12 defensive lineman if you're including all those edge type of players into that group too. Like some of these sites have Bosa, Joey Bosa, Chandler Jones, Max Crosby now as outside linebackers or edge just because of that, base defense that the team says that they're switching to. The edge kind of alleviates some of that in terms of it takes all that uncertainty and just throws those guys into the same grouping. But if you're throwing all of those type of guys into defensive linemen, does he have the talent? Yeah. Would I put any money on him doing it this year? No, just because of the pure amount of edge talent, that defensive end talent. And if you're throwing defensive tackles into there, I mean, Aaron Donald's probably going to be a DL1 in most leagues. It's really hard to crack that top 10 or 12.
Yeah, it'll be very hard. I mean, he's a nice depth piece, and those weeks that he has big sacks, then he gets you 1.5, things like that. I mean, it'll be great. The tough thing, I mean, like you said, it's what position is he? And then if you get him in that edge position, it's hard to trust him because then that pool is even bigger of what he's got to go up against. So, like the player, definitely like in where the defense is going, as long as Miami continues to develop this defense and put these guys in good positions, it should be fun defense to watch. I mean, they're definitely in a tough spot in that division.
So
Austin, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I'll just wrap it up and say, well, on him, I don't want to beat the guy down because we look at what he did last year, 8.5 sacks, and then he had 9 tackles for loss, and so his tackle totals were lower than you'd like to see. He's a guy that could go 50-50. Like, I mean, you're asking the question, if I'm not mistaken, was could he outperform his numbers? Well, he had 8.5 sacks and 9 tackles for loss, and if he does better than that, like, yeah, it's going to elevate his stock quite a bit, but. Is he a guy that could see some regression too? Maybe for me. I mean, they're bringing in Channing Tindall as well, who, I don't know where he'll slot in, if he'll be interior or, if he'll play off the ball or on the ball. I'm not really sure for him. So it's going to be interesting to see what they do with the defense this year. He is a guy I'm like 50-50 on. If you're asking me like, okay, here's what he did last year. Now, which way do we go? It's tough for me.
Yeah, I would think his sack totals, I mean, maybe dip a little, but I would expect the rest of that stuff to come up. And probably by the end of the season, you see a better total fantasy production, whether his sack totals stay, somewhere in the 6 to 9 range, maybe. But I would expect the rest of the stuff to come up some just because of probably what they'll do with them, I would think.
Yeah.
So hopefully that helps. Oh, Josh, hope so. Anthony picked him over Kadarius Toney. I mean, with what you've heard out of New York, who knows what they're going to do with Toney? With Wan'Dale Robinson and some of those, and with the new coaching staff and stuff. So I don't hate it. I mean, it's hard to trust Toney right now. But both are in the same situation: new coaching staffs, new schemes, things like that. So it'll be interesting to see where both of them fall at the end of the season. All right, so that is it. Thank you, guys. We do love hanging out with y'all and talking IDP. Tomorrow night, I will get to join potentially Kraig over on the Gridiron Ratings Show with Gary, the IDP tipster. So if you get a chance, 10 o'clock on YouTube, check us out. We'll be talking and having a good old time, and it'll be awesome as always because those guys are great. Thursday night, Des is back from his wonderful vacation, so we'll be talking some Devy, and I actually have no idea. It's a show topic we were supposed to do weeks ago, so I don't even remember what it is. I think it's maybe sleepers, Devy sleepers or something, but it's been a long week. It's only day one, and it's been a long week, so I can't remember. But rotoheat.com, jump in the Discord. New people have been joining Discord every day, and we love it. If you guys want to talk IDP or talk anything else, we got Devy, we got all sorts of channels right now. Everybody's sending all sorts of Zach Wilson gifs and memes around, so everyone's having a good old time with that. We have a good time, lots of good conversations, whether you're into sports or collectibles or movies or whatever. We got to chat for it. So, and you can get to that through rotoheat.com. Our rankings are over there. All of our articles, all that stuff, that's the main place to find it. As always, we thank you guys. We appreciate y'all. We love y'all, and we will see you next week.